So you've written a novel about Celia. Could you talk about that process?
Okay, well, I mean, it really goes back to my own, I guess my own, what can I say, process of finding myself as a writer. That my father was also a writer, but I always felt a kind of conflict with becoming a writer because of his writing and his, what can I say? I mean, he wasn't particularly successful. I mean, by our standards, he had some publications. So in contemporary life, he'd probably be considered a published author, which is already something. But for his day, I think, in his generation, he wanted to be this great writer, I don't know, Saul Bellow, somebody more heroic. And I mean, in writing my book, I came to understand that that kind of a figure is, I always saw it as typical to him, but I think it was really very much part of that generation of Jewish men who were first generation college students, and they all wanted to be geniuses, and artists in general were some sort of heroic figure. I mean, you don't really see that too much anymore if you think about it. I mean, the occasional movie director, but it's not really, nobody looks at writers as if they're, in that kind of world of superheroes or something. So anyway, I felt that I had my own conflicts with him. And then at a certain point I said, well, I do feel somehow like I identify with Celia, and she was successful. I mean, really quite successful. I mean, she's still famous. People are still writing dissertations about her. This is more than 50 years after she died. And so I said, well, why not, tap into that? And that wasn't the only reason to write the novel, but that was kind of a piece of it. And the novel was sort of structured around a character similar to myself meeting up with somebody who said, why don't you look into the lives of your grandmother and your mother, but before you were born, so that to understand them, to see what you inherited from them in terms of a legacy, and the legacy being not just literary, artistic, but also erotic and political. And so that's really what the novel explores, is the influence of these two female ancestors on this character in the early 21st century, who's trying to figure things out.
What was that research process like for you?
I mean, I'm an academic, so I understand research. It can be exciting, it can be tedious. It was interesting. There were some high points. Then as far as the Celia period, I was also doing some reading about Yiddish history at the time and Yiddish socialists and things like that. But mostly it was finding out what I could find out about Celia. And there's not a lot of biography of her. I mean, she didn't keep notes. People have sketched out sort of an outline, but it's not a thorough one. And I somehow in the process, I found her translator, Faith Jones, who had written a biography that's on Wikipedia, and met with her and basically read her short stories as a way of trying to fill in some gaps, because it seemed like the stories were sometimes based on reality. And some academic articles about her as well. And I went to YIVO. There's a set of archives, and I don't read Yiddish or Russian, so I read what I could. I was in touch with the Yiddish professor at Columbia, who had done her dissertation, I don't know if entirely on Celia, or at least partially on Celia, and she'd written an academic article on Celia, and she had, in the process, she had documented what was in the boxes in the archives, because Celia was pretty disorganized. I mean, the archives kind of a mess. There were just, notebooks and clippings, and it's just a mess, but at least Aggie, knowing Yiddish, and I assume she documented the Russian too, sort of said what was in each box, what to look at. And so I went there a couple times and read through what I could. And that was really interesting. That was fun. That was kind of like getting in touch with this person I didn't know. And so I think the research was was a real exploration. And, you know, it's, again, since it's a novel, then this becomes a character. You know, it's kind of strange. It's a strange process because over time then she became less and less my grandmother and more, on the one hand, a historical figure that I was learning about, and on the other hand, a character in my novel.